Hi, welcome to my channel Cloud with Girish. In this video, I'm going to show you how to build a serverless news summarizer using Lambda function and REST API and host it using API gateway. I will use AWS SAM to build, invoke locally, and then deploy using infrastructure as code approach. Lambda function will fetch the desired news content using a public news API and will be integrated via REST API to provide the response to the consuming app. I plan to build the solution in multiple parts where I will incrementally add features to this solution. There will be 5 parts to this series. In the first part, I am building a very simple news summarizer that uses AWS Lambda and API gateway. Then in the part 2, I will automate the news alerts with AWS Lambda, SNS, and EventBridge. In part 3, I'm going to add some generative AI capability using Amazon Bedrock. And then in part 4, I will build the serverless generative AI news summarizer with Lambda and Bedrock. And in the part 5th, I will add an HTML formatter to this news delivery using Bedrock, EventBridge, Lambda, and SNS. Before diving in, let's review the architecture diagram to understand how these components interact. So here is our architecture diagram. We have a user or a consuming app that will invoke the REST API. API is hosted using the API gateway. I'm using the API key and usage plan to make it a secure API. That means that consumer has to have the API key in order to use the API. The API is integrated with the Lambda function, and Lambda function is integrated with the CloudWatch for the logging purpose. It's going to get built using the SAM CloudFormation stack, and Lambda is also invoking the news API, and that news API is returning the news, and then Lambda function is returning it back to the API, and that's how the consumer is getting the response back. For the prereq, need to have the familiarity with the AWS Management Console, the knowledge of Python and Boto3 since I'm using the Python to build the function, basic understanding of AWS SAM, that is the serverless application model used for the IAC approach, basic understanding of Lambda and API gateway, and then basic familiarity with event-driven design and architecture. Now you do need to sign up for the news API and get the API key. We will talk a little more about it, right? It's a free tier that I'm using, but basically once you sign up, you get the API key and you need the key to use the news API. So let's get started. We're going to look at what are we building and why. We'll have an introduction to the public news API. That's the API that we are using to fetch the news. We're going to look at the snippet of our AWS SAM template and the Lambda function. Then I'll build the function locally using AWS SAM. I'm going to invoke it locally using AWS SAM and deploy it using the AWS SAM also. We'll look at the API endpoint and we'll review the responses using Postman on Bruno. In this exercise, I'm using Postman, but you can use any API validation tool of your choice. And then CloudWatch is integrated via the AWS Lambda function. So we're going to look at the log. And at the end, I will clean up the resources by deleting the entire stack, like deleting the Lambda function, the API, the log group, and all that. So let's look at what are we building and why. So we are building a serverless news summarizer that fetches the latest technology news from a public news API and exposes it through a REST API. This API can be invoked using tools like Postman or integrated into an application that offer user a personalized tech news experience. Why are we building this solution? Because staying up to date with the latest tech news is exciting, but manually checking blog, RSS feeds, and recap sites can be time consuming. What if you could automate that process using AWS Serverless and AI tools? And by automating this workflow, you can retrieve tech news highlights on demand via an API, or even extend the solution to deliver update straight to your inbox using the email, which we will see in one of the another part of this series. Let's look at the public news API. So newsapi.org is a news aggregation service that provides programmatic access to headlines and articles from major publications including CNN, BBC, TechCrunch, and many more. According to their website, News API returns JSON search results from over 150,000 sources. That means you really can customize your API to get the content of your choice and get it delivered. So this API allows developers to retrieve top headlines filtered by country or category, such as technology or business, and search across thousands of articles from various sources. This service offers a free tier with up to 100 requests per day. Through this, free access is restricted to non-commercial use. For developers building news application or integrating current event into the project, News API provides a straightforward way to access real-time news content from reputed sources worldwide. So I'm going to use SAM, which is Serverless Application Model, and I'm using the Lambda function and API gateway for this exercise. So let's look at the AWS SAM template. Now, this is the first thing you need when we talk about AWS SAM, because template.yaml, that's where you define the resources which are required to be built and deployed. So in this particular SAM template, there are two key resources that we have defined. One is the Lambda function. So my function here is GB News summarizer handler. That's my function here. I'm using the Python runtime. It has some timeout and memory size and so on. There is also an API key here that you will see, and then there is a API integration here. So and there is a API key required is true. So these are all the resources that you will see that I have defined in this template.yaml file. Let's look at the Lambda function itself. So this is a Lambda function. In the Lambda handler, I'm first checking that, hey, if there is a query string parameter, then I can use that. If there is no query string parameter, then I will basically just go without that parameter and apply other settings and continue with the logic in this function. There is a custom function defined here, which is a fetch news, and this one basically using the news API key, and it has other params. So I'm fetching the news from US. My category is technology. I have defined page size. Basically, that's the number of articles to fetch. Now, for the purpose of this exercise, I'm just saying 5. You can say 10, 20, 30, 40. And so on, right? And then I'm saying that sorted by published at, and then my language is English, and my API key I'm providing. So with all of that, I'm gonna do a get on this and basically get the response. And if my response status code is 200, which is a successful response, then I'm gonna return the articles. If it's not 200, then I will basically check for the error code, and I will return that error in the response accordingly. Now I have the SAM template and I have the Lambda function. So I'm using the AWS SAM. So then I can now begin building the function and the command to build the Lambda function here. Actually, the entire stack, the Lambda function API, anything that's in the template.yaml, the command is SAM build. And if everything is configured correctly, then I should see that build succeeded. And once build is succeeded, then in the next step, I can invoke it locally using SAM local invoke, and then I can deploy it in AWS Cloud using the SAM deploy commands. So here I have a succeed message. So let's look at that invoke this function. How do you invoke it? So command for that is SAM local invoke and the function name. So in this particular example, function name is GB News Summarizer FN. So I'm saying SAM local invoke. And when this function is executed, this is still local, right? So if your environment is configured, you are not in the cloud yet, you are invoking it locally, and this is how your output should look like. So this is basically giving you all the article that is fetching, and you can see the status code of 200, and that indicate that you are getting all these articles from the API. Once everything looks good, I can actually deploy it now to AWS Cloud using the command SAM deploy. And then I can provide the function name and app name and so on, right? All the parameters. So this is a concise workflow that demonstrates how to create, validate, deploy Lambda function using AWS SAM. And by leveraging AWS SAM, you can streamline the development process and ensure your functions are tested thoroughly before deployment. Now, if you are following me on my channel, you probably will see like hundreds of other videos where, like, many of those videos I'm using AWS SAM. I just like the framework. It's simple to use for quick prototypes. Now, of course, the other scenario, there are company standards where different IAC tools like Terraform may be used. It really comes down to what like a company using. So there may be Terraform, there may be like CDK, there may be like a advanced form of cloud formation. So all those options are on the table. But here it's basically, as you can see how simple it is once your environment is configured, it's AWS SAM commands are pretty straightforward to use. So now that I have my API and my Lambda function all built and ready to go, I can use an API validation tool to validate the API endpoint. So I'm using the Postman in this example, and it's really, if you are familiar with the Postman, it's as simple as providing your endpoint, providing the type of method like a get or post, and really like invoke it, right? Now, one thing to remember that this API that I have built, it's a secure API. That means that you got to have an API key to invoke it. If API key is not provided at the time like you are ready to invoke it, you will get a 403 forbidden message, right? That's a standard HTTP response code. So you will get a 403 if an API key is not provided. Now, if I do have API key provided and I have the right endpoint and I invoke it, then you will see that I'm getting the response back. Basically, I'm getting all the articles in the response, and it's telling me that, hey, these are the news that being returned to you via the API. I can also review the CloudWatch log, because Lambda function by design is integrated with CloudWatch, and it will create a log group and a stream. And I can look at the log basically and say, yeah, I'm getting like, am I getting a query string parameter, or like what kind of the flow within my function is happening. So CloudWatch log, just like any other logging mechanism, is a great way to watch or look and investigate that what's happening, like when you do the invocation of API, which in turn gonna invoke the Lambda function, right? That's where the code is. So with that, like once we are done with this exercise, the best practice I follow is to delete all the resources created, so that if I don't need those resources, then they don't incur charge, impacting overall cloud cost and budget. So another thing, like because I built it using the IAC, that means I can destroy, I can delete them using the IAC as well. So that's the advantage of using infrastructure as code approach, opposed to like ClickOps using the console. If you build something using the console, that means you have to go and delete all those resources manually one by one. So you will delete your API, you'll delete your Lambda function, you'll delete your other integration point and so on. But here, like, because I built it using the SAM, I simply can destroy, delete it using SAM delete command, and it's gonna delete all the entire change stack that it created. Now, if I don't want to do SAM delete, then of course nothing really prevents me from deleting it using the AWS console. So I can log into AWS console and can delete it one by one as well. So in this workshop, I demonstrated how to build a new summarizer using a Lambda function and a REST API. The Lambda function uses a news aggregator API from newsapi.org, which returns news result in JSON format. This API can be integrated with a UI to deliver a customized news experience for users. I hope you found this tutorial both helpful and informative. If you are interested in extending this project further, stay tuned for my upcoming 5-part deep dive series where I walk through building a full-feature AI-powered news delivery using AWS. So these 5 parts, as I described in the beginning, they range from using the Lambda and API gateway service to all the way to SNS, EventBridge, and even like Amazon Bedrock using the LLM to do further AI summarization before returning the response. And again, through the SNS or SES, these can be like, send in your inbox via the email, right? So pretty cool stuff. I'm constantly creating new content on various AWS topics. So please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the Cloud with Girish channel. Your support helps me continue producing valuable AWS tutorials and workshops. Stay tuned for more exciting content. Thank you.